A number of people have asked about the event that I did at the Diocese of Leeds in terms of the relationship of science and faith. And they've asked, what did I talk about? So here's a quick summary of the kind of points that I wanted to raise. The Bishop of Leeds asked both myself and Brian Cox to talk about science, the cosmos, and human meaning. And it seemed to me that there were 5 areas from my experience of being an astrophysicist and now being a theologian that were important for human meaning. The first sounds rather trivial, and that is to say that the universe is big. Now, many people will say, that's obvious, isn't it? I mean, there's no great point to that in terms of human meaning. But of course, we now know that the universe is huge. One of the galaxies that we've looked at very recently, GNZ 11, is a very small galaxy. Actually, in terms of its structure, it's pretty insignificant. But the light from that galaxy has taken over 13 billion years to reach us. It's one of the furthest objects we've ever seen in the universe. The light from the sun takes about 8 minutes to get to the surface of the Earth. The light from that galaxy has taken 13 billion years. And that is one galaxy in a universe of about 100 billion galaxies. And each galaxy typically contains about 100 billion stars. So how many stars are there in the universe? It's very easy. You multiply 100 billion by 100 billion. The answer is, of course, a lot. There's something about then asking what human meaning is in the midst of that. Many, many years ago, a psalmist wrote, when I look at the heavens, the moon and the stars which you have created, what are human beings that you're mindful of them? And there's something about asking about human meaning in the midst of such a vast universe. For some people, it's awe-inspiring. For some people, it's quite disturbing. The second thing about the universe for me is the sense in which, and I use this wisely, it is just right for carbon-based life. What Paul Davies called the Goldilocks enigma. The fact that the law and circumstance of the universe are just right for the production of carbon-based intelligent life. And not just right, but just right. It's extraordinary how some of the balances, the anthropic balances as sometimes called, in the nature of certain physical laws, that combine together to make possible carbon-based life. A number of years ago, the Astronomer Royal, Lord Rees, wrote a book called Just 6 Numbers. And he picked out 6 numbers which, if they were just slightly different to what they are in the laws of physics, there would be no intelligent life. Now, I'm not going to immediately say, well, this obviously proves God, because God is the only option that gives meaning to this. But it does say something about the significance of human life, or the significance at least of carbon-based intelligent life. Rees goes on in his book to say actually there are 3 main explanations for why the universe is just right. The first, he says, is we could say, well, it just is. That's just the way it is, and we stop thinking about anything more. But for him, that's not an option, because they're so extraordinary balances that he thinks there's some kind of deeper story going on. The second, he admits, is we say that God created the universe and set it up in this kind of way. But his third option is that we are one of many universes, a multiverse. And in our universe, the laws and circumstances are just right, which means we're here to observe it. In other universes where the laws are different, then there are no observers to observe that things are just right. Now, this is an interesting suggestion, and its status as a scientific theory or a metaphysical theory is under dispute. But nevertheless, I think it's cautionary for Christians and other religious believers to hear that and not to try and recreate what was called the design argument, to say if the universe is just right, the only explanation is God. The third aspect about the universe, which is extraordinary to me, is that it's intelligible. Not so long ago, a physicist in Durham came up to me with tears in his eyes and hugged me. This doesn't often happen in Durham with physicists, it has to be said. And it was on the day that gravitational waves were detected, or at least the announcement was made. And my friend and I had nothing to do with that particular experiment, or indeed the theory behind it. But we were so overwhelmed at this discovery because 100 years or so ago, Einstein had said, if two black holes start to merge, then the fabric of space-time, by which he'd explained gravity, general relativity, that fabric would have little ripples in it, little ripples of space-time, gravitational waves. And then he said, by the way, you'll probably never see them. They'll be far too difficult to detect. And then in the Advanced LIGO experiment, where one laser was shot in one direction, another laser shot perpendicular to it, and then the beams were deflected and then combined back again as a way of seeing whether there was any ripple of space-time moving through the Earth. They found a result. They found that space-time fluctuation over gravitational waves lengthened one of the paths of a laser by a fraction of the diameter of a proton. And we saw it, we discovered it. It's an extraordinary thing that you can predict something about the universe 100 years ago and then discover it to be true. Einstein himself said the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. Why should that be? Why should the laws of physics be so beautiful and intelligible to us? Now, one of my predecessors here at Durham University, the Reverend Temple Chevalier, in fact the first professor of astronomy appointed in the 1840s, used some of these arguments a long time ago in the 19th century, not to try and prove God, but to at least pose some questions. He was a distinguished astronomer, also a distinguished theologian, and he said that there's something about our awe at the universe that at least asks us to look for deeper meaning. He was a scientist, and like many of us who've been scientists, we know that most of science actually is not awe-inspiring. Most of science is tedious, it's frustrating, it's boring. Sometimes it's about research councils who don't give you the money that you think you deserve. Sometimes it's about peer-reviewed journals where people don't see the brilliance of your work. Sometimes it's about research students who don't do what you tell them to do. But within all of that, there's something about this experience of, wow, look at that. At least for me, things such as the intelligibility of the universe, the sense that the universe seems to be just right, and the vastness of the universe are wow factors, which resonate with my Christian faith, but also open up a conversation with those of different faiths and of none. But there are two other things about the universe that strike me, which also I think are important, certainly for Christians to take seriously, and they're very recent developments. The first is something that happened in the late 90s when a number of people studying the light from distant supernovas discovered that the universe wasn't slowing down or was going to be reversed in its expansion, but in fact was speeding up. The accelerating universe, for which Brian Schmidt and Adam Rice and Saul Perlmutter eventually were awarded the Nobel Prize. This was unexpected by physicists. And it really suggests that the future of the universe is destined to futility. The universe will expand forever, and it will die a death called heat death as things cool down and all the matter gets locked up into black holes. Some people find this profoundly depressing. Steven Weinberg talked about how as we comprehend more of the universe, it seems to have no purpose to it at all. Now, at this point for me as a Christian, there's an interesting resonance with the Bible's teaching, the New Testament's teaching, that God's purposes go beyond this heaven and earth, this universe, to a new heaven and a new earth, new creation, as John Wesley would talk about. And so I think there's a dialogue to be had between Christian theology and what science is saying about the future of the universe. Second area of dialogue, which I think is really exciting, is the fact that there may be other life out there. And this really has been spurred by recent discoveries of planets outside our solar system, including one very close to us. There's a star, our closest star, called Proxima Centauri. It's about 4 light years away from us. That's close in astronomical terms. And we now know that there's a planet around Proxima Centauri, a fairly small star, which is in what's called the habitable zone. That's where water should be in liquid form according to the temperature. And that's important, we think, for the development of life. This is exciting for a whole number of reasons. The next generation of telescopes will probably be able to look at the atmosphere of this planet in Proxima Centauri and say if there's life there at all. But that's just one planet now of over 3,500 planets that we've discovered outside of our solar system. I have an app on my smartphone which tells me each day about new planets that have been discovered outside our solar system. There's probably something like the order of 10% of stars will have planetary systems and possibly have rocky planets like the Earth in the habitable zone. Now, if there's 100 billion stars in 100 billion galaxies, and about 10% of them might have planets, then people will say, well, doesn't that mean that there's intelligent life out there? Well, not inevitably. I sometimes say it's a long way from an amoeba to an accountant. Forgive me any accountants who might be around, but there's a difference between simple, primitive life, bacteria, and intelligent beings such as human beings. That's why, although a lot of astronomers are keen on intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, a lot of biologists are quite skeptical because of the very long and sensitive process that it takes to build intelligent, self-conscious life. Nevertheless, I think those issues raise for Christian theology very interesting questions. What does it mean to be special as human beings if we're not alone? What's the significance of the Jesus event at Calvary? What Christians call redemption, if there is other intelligent life out there. And their Christian theologians have had a little bit of a dialogue. Not many, but some have said, well, perhaps the work of Jesus at Calvary was once for all for the whole universe. The difficulty of that position is that Christians would have to become space missionaries, going out telling people about Jesus, and that's a very long missionary journey, by the way. Or it may be that Jesus becomes incarnate in little green flesh, if there are little green women and men out there. Those are some of the questions that are around. Now let me come back to say, if those 5 areas, there's possibly life, the end of the universe, the intelligibility of the universe, the fact that the universe is just right, the universe is very big, those 5 put together don't in any way start to prove God. They may allow us a deeper connection, a deeper conversation between science and religious faith. But the reason that I'm a Christian, and people ask me, is it to do with science? No, it's not to do with science. For me, a Christian faith is in conversation with science, but it has a slightly different focus. To use an old illustration, a scientist would describe a kiss as the approach of 2 pairs of lips, the reciprocal transmission of carbon dioxide and microbes, and the juxtaposition of 2 orbicular muscles in a state of contraction. That's a kiss in scientific terms. But if I'm with my wife, I don't want to say to her, let me get together with you for a mutual transmission of carbon dioxide and microbes. Let me juxtapose my orbicular muscle in a state of contraction with yours. She would say to me, get lost. You see, in that context, I want to talk about questions of meaning, value, purpose, love. Now, which is the true definition, which is the true understanding of a kiss? Is it the carbon dioxide or is it the love? Actually, I think both are true but different. They're complementary ways of describing the same thing. And so when it comes, say, to the origin of the universe for me, it seems to me entirely possible that the Big Bang is the best interpretation of the evidence that we have at the moment, but it doesn't explain questions of meaning, value and purpose, which for me are found in the belief that the universe is creation by a creator God. And the final thing that I always want to be clear about in talking about these issues is not to suggest that science allows me to derive the existence and the nature of God. For me, that comes about through the Christian claim that God reveals himself within the universe, primarily by becoming a human person in the life, death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. That's why I'm a Christian. That's why I believe in God. That's why I believe that God is a God of love. Not because I can read it from the stars, but because I can read it from the historical account of the events surrounding Jesus of Nazareth. Now, that doesn't close down the conversation again, because a conversation needs to be had about the historical veracity of the records, about how you interpret the events, and indeed whether those are relevant to people today or not. But it does seem to me to give a starting point for conversation